Viktor Frankl said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way." This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson. Stay tuned for the next hour as Sue explores the human psyche, what makes us tick, and how to live better, more fulfilled and more meaningful lives. Only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on High FM on my Finding Human program. I'm on Skype today and my guest is Dr. Les Glassman from Israel, and our topic is, in our divided world, is unity possible? Les and I would like to dedicate this program to Harold Smokey Simon, a true legend who passed away on the 28th of February, just short of his 102nd birthday. Les and I both had the privilege of interviewing him. Les met him a few times, so he was luckier than I was. Fly gently, Smokey. Hello, Les, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on your incredible program and show. And you're right, Smokey, may his dear soul rest in peace and may his memory be for eternal blessing, was not only an icon, but he was a hero and he was a mensch, and he was such an incredible person. So it was such an honor to meet him.
Yes, and you were so lucky to meet him, Les, gosh.
I was in his home and he was so kind to me. I interviewed him a few times. You know, he was a Wits graduate. And sure, and he actually, his story was so riveting, and he just made you feel so at home when I came to visit him. And then I actually brought people to meet him as well. A good friend of mine, his son was in the Israeli Air Force, and it was his dream to meet Smokey, and Smokey allowed him to come, and we spent an afternoon together, and it was just absolutely unbelievable.
Well, my grandson Joshua also had the privilege of meeting him, even though it was on Zoom. But Les, you know what? I asked you to please send me your CV, and I had a good laugh because you sent one back saying, "I've never done a CV." And I had heard a YouTube which said, "Build your life, not your resume." And this really fills your shoes. This is who you are. You have built your life, and that has become your resume. And I'm actually in awe of all that you have done. So let me just introduce a little bit. We're going to go through various things that you have done, and you're going to discuss it. But right now, I would like to thank your sister, Karen Chernick, who gave you my number. And Les was the one who introduced Miriam Bracher to me, who I had on my program a few weeks ago. I do think, Les, that this quote by Simon Sinek is really very much indicative of who you are. Life is beautiful not because of the things we see or do. Life is beautiful because of the people we meet. And you have met so many incredible people. We're going to get back to that in a moment.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson. Only on 101.9 High FM.
This is Sue Jackson, and I'm back with Dr. Les Glassman. And Les is in Israel, and he is a dentist there. And welcome again, Les.
Thank
you
so
started
much,
talking to me as we went to advert. What were you going to say?
That is very kind of you to say the things that you said there. I've just been very fortunate to meet incredible people. It's not my doing, it's just... it's been a gift that I've been able to just connect with just the most amazing Holocaust survivors and Israelis and from all walks of life. And I'm just very grateful that I've had that opportunity.
And Les, I see you say that your grandmother, Zahava, was your inspiration. How was she your inspiration?
So, you know, we were four grandchildren. My mother was the only child, the only daughter. She had a very hard life. She actually was born in Mariupol in Lithuania, and she spoke about Lithuania. It became very real to us. We would love to hear the stories. My biggest regret is that I never videoed her speaking, and I wish I would have. But you know, those memories are with me every day, and we had such a love of Lita and Lithuania and her family. It was a very close family. and they were very Zionistic. Her father sent the mother and my grand and her brothers to Israel. Well, in those days it was Palestine. In the time of the Turks, they were so Zionistic. They spoke Hebrew at home, and education was really important. And her father sent her, her parents sent her with her brothers to France to study at in Toulouse at the university in the 20s, which was very unusual for a girl to study at university in a foreign country in a foreign language. And there she met her husband, and they came to South Africa. And unfortunately, her father passed away and her husband passed away. And she was left with her daughter, who was my mother. But my grandmother, we used to ask her, who's your favorite grandchild? And she would say to us, look at your hand. Choose which is your favorite finger. She says, I've got no favorites. You're all my favorite.
Oh, but, that's beautiful.
So she was our inspiration. You know, we loved being with her, and my brother stayed with her, and then I stayed with her. And we would never, you know, when she was getting on in age, we just would never dream of sending her to a home. She was in her own house, and her family all came to visit her. She was a religious lady, and she just instilled with us the love of Yiddishkeit and the love of Israel and the love of history.
Well, that's a wonderful tribute to her, Les. And honestly, she's obviously had a great influence on your life. And I see that you actually went to Wits Dental School. I know that you were asked to be the Wits alumni representative in Israel. But after matriculating, you went to the Wits Dental School and you had your kippah on, your yarmulke on, and you were accepted. And I see that instead of going into the army, you chose, which was compulsory in those days, you chose to go into the Department of Health. Why did you do that? What was it that made you decide you were not going into the army?
Okay, so I'll just mention about Wits. They asked me if I could be and here I'm also grateful to Natalie Letnatsky, because she introduced me to Peter Mayer from the Wits alumni. And she said, would you be willing to be the representative in Israel? And, you know, I remember when I went to dental school, in my class, I wasn't the first because my brother and years before people wore a yarmulke, but it was a little bit unusual wearing a yarmulke in dental school. But I did. And what was amazing is that if there was an exam or if there was a very important lecture that fell on a Jewish holiday, they changed the exam just for me, the whole class. And it was never an issue. So I was so grateful because, you know, people were so accommodating. And what I also remember in dental school is that it was, you know, it was very multiracial in those days. It was during the apartheid era. We started in 78. So that was at the heart of apartheid. And we had coloreds, blacks, Indians, Muslims, Jews. We were all and we all got on so well with each other. And it was race and religion played no part. Our friends made no difference. We really united as a class, and it was wonderful. Racism just didn't exist at Wits Dental School. And what was very interesting, Sue, is when we had our dental ball every year, the place where we had it was in the Oxford Shul Hall. Because in those days, blacks and whites couldn't even go into a five-star hotel. It was forbidden. But in the Shul Hall, everybody was welcome, and that's where we used to have our dental ball. So I'm extremely grateful. I'm very grateful to Wits. So when I graduated, I don't know, we were brought up in a family where apartheid didn't play any part in our lives. You call it liberal, I don't know, we just felt everybody should be equal. So going into the army, I just didn't really believe in it. I had nothing against anybody of a different color. I felt I couldn't do that. Mm-hmm. So I volunteered to go to serve in it was the Department of Health. And I worked in Baragwanath and in the different clinics in Soweto for 2 years, which was a phenomenal experience. And being in the clinics in Soweto during, this was in 84, 85, it was a little tense going into the townships, but it was an eye-opener because, you know, I really got to meet the people on the ground there, and you really see the inequalities. Zola Clinic was a place in Soweto where there was no electricity. The whole clinic worked on generators.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually quite unbelievable seeing the, you know, coming from like the northern suburbs going into Soweto. Not too many whites actually went into Soweto in those days, and you actually saw the tremendous poverty and the inequality. So that had a profound impact on me. But being there and treating patients, and we treated them just as we would treat anyone. And so when I finished after 2 years, I joined my brother in Alberton. And it was also quite amazing because my brother opened this dental practice in Alberton, in Verwoerd Park. And any patient, regardless of one's color, was accepted. And there were medical and dental practices where they would have separate rooms for black patients at the back. But here,
amazing.
I didn't hear everybody was in the same waiting room use this. There was no discrimination whatsoever.
So you chose your choice of how to behave.
Well, I'll tell you, it was something very interesting. It was something that I didn't even realize how serious it was. My nurse, I had an Afrikaans nurse, and she was a bit uncomfortable when a black patient came on the chair, but she was okay. But what really upset her, and she couldn't stay, was when after the treatment, I said, well, give the glass, that he can rinse out with. And she said, but it's the same glass that I drink from. And it was so, for her, it was, so, I didn't even realize that this was going on, but for her, it was so traumatic that the patient was going to drink from the same glass as her. Look, today it seems unimaginable, but in those days it was very real. So she decided she didn't want to stay there, but we put the patients first. Every patient was equal.
We're going to get back to that shortly. That's fascinating.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hi, this is Sue Jackson, and I'm back with Dr. Les Glassman from Israel. And our topic is, in our divided world, is unity possible? And Les is actually showing that it is. And we've got a message from a Mary Ann Alto, and she says, I agree wholeheartedly with the statement to build your life, not your resume. Mary Ann from Northcliffe. Thank you, Mary Ann. Hi, Les. I'm back with you again. If anyone would like to send us a message, please do so on 34519 or telegram us on 061 895 1019. Les, going back to you and working with your brother and with the nurse and the glass, it's only us who have lived through apartheid can actually understand that. And I'll never forget going to a nursing conference representing South Africa in Montreal in the 1960s, late 1960s. And we were a white delegation. Apartheid was in full swing. And when we got there, we were under a banner that said South Africa. And the next minute, we were totally surrounded by nurses from all over the world, of all colors and all persuasions. And it was just too wonderful. It was a time of such connection. They were missing South Africa. They had left because of apartheid. And they wanted to hear what was happening in our country. And it was the most wonderful few days of actual togetherness.
That's wonderful.
Now, going back to you, Les, I know that the one thing that you did say, that when you got married to your wife, Lucy, which was in 1985, you actually invited nurses and dentists of different persuasions, colors, cultures to the wedding.
So we had it in the Oxford shul, and it was amazing because the nurses, and they were Indian and Muslim and whoever I worked with, I invited. It was an open invitation, and many actually came to the wedding, and they had never, nearly all, had never ever been inside a synagogue before. And not only that, after the chuppah and after we got married, with the reception, they sat together, and I don't know, so I'm sure you remember, this was in 85, blacks and whites couldn't really sit in the same restaurant, or you couldn't be in the same hotel, but here in the hall, it was the shul hall of Oxford Shul, so everybody sat together. And for them, it was the most incredible experience. They just couldn't believe that they were being treated equally. And
Wow.
for us, we just kind of took it for granted. It wasn't an issue. I just felt, well, it's our wedding. I want him to be there. And looking back, it was a very natural thing. But for when I came back to work a week later, after the Shiva Brachot, so they just told me that it really was for them a little life-changing because they had never really experienced that before, that they were treated totally equally, and their perceptions of Judaism or a synagogue had changed drastically because they were a little bit scared to go because they had never been before. And here they were accepted with open arms. There never has been ever, I think in the history of South Africa, no one has ever been forbidden to go into a synagogue, which is, that fact isn't
Not
really
many
so well
people
known.
realize that, I don't
Yeah,
think.
yeah. So that was really wonderful. It was, and I've got video. I'm so glad that we did video that event. So and they came with their traditional dresses, the African staff, which was unbelievable, and they just enjoyed the whole atmosphere, the dancing, and for them it was I was just so grateful that they came.
Absolutely, because there must have been fear there. And the Baal Shem Tov said, fear builds walls to bar the light.
Yeah, that's so true.
I think what you're saying is right throughout this resume, so-called resume, it's showing me how you actually broke down those walls of fear and connected with people across the world, which is just amazing. I know that you made Aliyah in 1994, but that you came back to South Africa for the elections. What did you actually come back just to vote, or what was your reason for coming back?
Okay, so when we made Aliyah, I came with my wife and my daughters, and my brother said to me, I had to redo the exam. It was very difficult, requalifying in Israel. And my brother said, you have such a connection, and I really did have a tremendous connection in Alberton. It was also very interesting because there we saw patients from all spectrums of South African life. And I really connected with the patients. And he said, it's a pity for you to give it up. So I thought, you know what, I'm still going to continue my registration, and I'm still going to work in South Africa. And I would go back 2 or 3 times a year. And I kept this going on until the corona. Actually, I'd go back twice a year in July and in December. And what was lovely in December, when the other dentists would go away for Christmas and New Year, so we would see the emergency patients. And all the dentists in that area, we all actually got on extremely well. We would refer to each other. It was a wonderful camaraderie of the dental fraternity. We all got on exceptionally well. But I came back to South Africa in February because I still had patients, orthodontic patients that I was in the middle of treatment. And I really wanted to come back for that election because that election was a turning point in the history of South Africa. It was a monumental event, and it was a little bit nerve-wracking because I don't know if you remember, we thought it might turn into a civil war. Things were very, very, very tense. And I remember going back on the flight. It was rather empty, that flight going back. But I did go back and I did vote in that election. And just being part of it, I felt I was being part of South African history because it really was something that people gave up their lives in order to vote in a democratic country. And what Mandela stood for became a reality. So it was wonderful being in South Africa at that time. And I did work as well, but I was just fortunate to, be part of South African history in that election in '94.
And it certainly was unbelievable, that the feeling at the time. And something that Nelson Mandela actually said was, "Don't fear change, change fear."
So, Sue, can I just, with Nelson Mandela, can I just mention one quote that he wrote, which had such a profound impact on me. When he was, I remember watching on TV, and I think the whole country was glued when the day that he was released from prison, and I think it was the Victor Verster prison when he left. So he said, as I walked out of the door towards the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew that if I didn't leave my bitterness and my hatred behind, I'd still be in prison. And, knowing his history, knowing what he went through, not only in those 27 years, but reading his biography, they wouldn't allow him to bury his son when his son died. And he pleaded with them. He said, it's our tradition. I have to bury my son. But they wouldn't. It was very, very cruel what they did. And he really suffered. But, he rose. I mean, he is an example that we can all strive to emulate. He rose against such adversity. He was unbelievable. And in his book, A Long Walk to Freedom, in his biography, he has something also. He had tremendous karasa tov. That's gratitude. He writes there that the Jewish community really stood out, that many of his friends were Jewish and they helped him in the struggle. And he mentions in particular Lars Sadelsky. And Lars' son, Dov, and Colin, I know quite well. Dov lives here in Beit Vegan, and he wrote a little book called Mandela's Boss, because his father actually, Walter Sisulu approached him, and he asked him, could you give my friend, he needed to do articles. And Nelson also, he studied at Wits, and there he also had, but I think he graduated, he had to do it through UNISA, but what happened is that he needed to do articles, and nobody wanted to take him because he was black. And Lars Sadelsky actually took him in, and that's where he did his articles, and that's where he got his, he could qualify as a lawyer. And he treated him equally as everybody else. And Mandela...
I remember reading that when he took off his gown and hung it behind, he asked where he should put it, and he was told with the others, with mine behind the door, and he was so surprised. Madiba was so surprised that that's what he was being told to do. It was equal.
So what happened is that Dov wrote a little booklet called Mandela's Boss. And if I could just mention this to you, when I met the South African ambassador, Sisa Ngombeni, when he came to Israel, I had a meeting with him and I brought two books. There was one, it's a very large coffee table book, a very nice book on Mandela and the Jewish community. And I also brought this little book, which was my book, Mandela's Boss by Barry and Colin Sadelsky. And I showed him both books. And Sisa, the ambassador, he was only interested in that little book on Mandela's Boss. And I said, you can have it with pleasure. It's, I'll get another one. But it really is amazing because it just showed the human touch that Lars treated him equally like every other, anyone else. He was treated equally. But in those days, it wasn't so obvious.
Now, that particular YouTube of yours on Nelson Mandela's legacy that you actually did in Israel with the then ambassador is a very good YouTube. I actually want to mention to people that you have many YouTubes out there. How can they access those, Les?
So they just go to, now this I also do. I don't do it for any financial gain, because I've been very privileged to meet with, thank God, with many survivors, Holocaust survivors, which I feel very passionate about, just documenting their stories. So I was also asked to record at the Great Synagogue and the OU, the Israel Center in Chabad. But for Wits, the Wits alumni, so when we had our event, it was 7 years ago, I think in 2014, we wanted to honor the legacy of Nelson Mandela. And we had this event at Tel Aviv University, and it was just when the Gaza war had broken out. It was a week after my daughter's wedding. It was incredible, because a week before, life was unbelievable, and people were so many tourists. And then a week later, fortunately, we had the rockets and the Gaza war started. And we didn't know that the event was going to take place, but it actually did, and 200 people attended. But what was amazing about that event, Sue, is that we had a member of the Knesset, Dov Lipman. He actually opened the event. Nick Walpe from Ladies Leaf, the CEO, he actually came to that event as well. And I don't know if our listeners remember Benjamin Pogrant, who was the deputy editor of the Rand Daily Mail, who was a very close friend of Nelson Mandela before he was incarcerated, during the incarceration, even after. He remained in very close contact with Nelson Mandela all those years. And Tova Herzl, who's she was the Israeli ambassador to Latvia and Lithuania and Estonia. And then in 94, she was the Israeli ambassador in South Africa. So she was our MC. We asked her to be the MC. And what's very interesting about Tova, her mother, Rachel, who lives in the old city, who's in her 90s, bless her, she is one of the most incredible people I've ever met. She's a survivor, a Holocaust survivor from Auschwitz, and I was very fortunate to actually be in her home and to just document her story. And that video is actually going to be in the Cape Town Holocaust Museum. But what an amazing, incredible, unbelievable person Tova's mother is. Anyway, we had this event, but then we also invited Bassem Ed, who I think you know, he's from the Palestinian Human Rights, he's a monitor, and he also spoke at that event. So what was quite phenomenal is we had a Palestinian, we had an Israeli, we had a member of the Knesset, we had the South African ambassador. It was such a wonderful, the keynote speakers, it was just unbelievable how everybody just contributed and gave over their stories, and it was open to the public. Whoever wanted to come could come and ask any questions. And there were many people that came. There were Eritrean refugees that were there in the hall that even asked questions, and it was just a wonderful, special event.
So tell me, Les, listening to you and having come through apartheid myself and lived through the terrible results of it and how we're still suffering because of it in South Africa, and Israel being called an apartheid state, which absolutely makes my blood boil. Do you think it's possible to disagree with someone but to still live in peace with them?
Okay, so absolutely. So, Sue, can I just tell you what happened? It's such a wonderful title. You said, "Is unity possible?" So this was through an experience. It was 7 years ago. I'll never forget. There was 1 week that really changed my life a bit. It was in November in 2014. On a Sunday night, Israel was playing an international soccer game in Haifa at the Sami Ofer Stadium, and I went. I'm a very keen soccer supporter, and I always support Israel. And in the Israeli national team, people don't know this, but about a third of the team is made up of Israeli Arabs, who are mainly Muslim.
I never knew that.
Now, at the interval, and there were 30,000 people, maybe even more. I think it was full to capacity, about 33,000 people. At the interval, the Israeli Football Association, they honored the Israeli iconic goalkeeper called Nir Davidovich. He played for Maccabi Haifa, and he got a standing ovation. And then they honored another Israeli player called Walid Badir. Walid Badir is an Israeli Arab, and he played also for Maccabi Haifa and Hapoel Tel Aviv, and he actually captained Hapoel Tel Aviv. And he played in 74 international games for Israel, and he scored 12 goals for the Israeli national team. And I remember going with my daughter to the game when Israel played against France in 2006. And in the very first minute of that game, France scored, so we were losing 1-0. And in the 83rd minute, Wali Badir scored the equalizer. And the crowd was in Ramat Gan. The crowd went ecstatic. We couldn't believe it. Here we had France that actually won the World Cup that year, that we actually equalized with one of the top teams in the world. Possibly it was the top team in the world. And it was a Muslim Israeli Arab that scored the goal. So, when I have patients that are Palestinian, I had a very close friend of mine was the South African ambassador to the Palestinian Authority. He came as a patient, and we became very close friends, and we remained close friends, and his wife and his son, they come to me, and his wife's family, our patients. And, we don't all agree on many things, but we agree on other things. You don't have to agree with, everybody has their own ideas and their own, you can, whatever you feel about the situation, you don't have to agree with each other. You can agree to disagree. But when you see each other
We're
Okay.
going to get back to that shortly, Les.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
This is Sue Jackson, and I'm back with Dr. Les Glassman. And Les, you were just saying there that you don't have to agree, but you can still enjoy being with each other. And that made me think of how often we've got to replace other people with I, so that we take them out of those brackets and we look at ourselves instead.
No, absolutely. So I'll just mention, so that it was those 3 nights. The Sunday night I went to that soccer game, and what was a little bit so sad about that event, when we had the same Wally Badir, he also got a standing ovation, and 30,000 people. And I was there, I witnessed it myself. Everybody stood up and gave the same standing ovation for Wally Badir as they gave for Nir Davidovich. It was absolutely incredible. But you know what the sad thing is? It didn't appear in the press. Such a positive, wonderful story just didn't appear in, that should have made headlines throughout the world, because it really was a monumental event. The next night was my niece's wedding, which was on the Monday night. And then unfortunately on the Tuesday morning, there was a terrible event in Hanoth, in Agassi Street, in the Kilat B'nai Torah shul, where 4 rabbis unfortunately were massacred. And one of the rabbis was my patient, Rabbi Goldberg, and his daughter was actually at my niece's wedding the night before. But what was amazing about that is that there was a Druze police officer, Zidan Sif, who actually came to help rescue, in the massacre, and he was also killed. And the whole of the Hanof community, they got together and they went to visit the family of this Druze police officer who gave his life also to try and save. So, it's amazing that when they speak about apartheid in Israel, it's the total opposite. Here we have groups like Hatzolah, where you have Muslims, Christians, Jews, all working together. You go to the hospitals, and I live right above Shari Tzedek. In the hospitals, I worked in Wilson in a medical center. To this very day, I don't know which doctor was Muslim, Christian. It made no difference. I still don't know, and it didn't interest me to know. What difference does it make? Everybody, you go see a specialist. You don't want to know what religion or, where he's standing on the political spectrum. It's irrelevant. You're seeing the person for his expertise. You're looking at the person as the person.
And I must admit, Les, that I remember when my granddaughter was born at Sheba Hospital, and I remember standing at the nursery entrance and we're looking at all the little children there. There was such a mixture of cultures there. And I thought to myself, here you are all, lying side by side, coming into this world. And my prayer was that, please God, one day you'll all sit by side at a table and come to some sort of peaceful agreement.
Well, please God, but when you actually live in Jerusalem, which is a melting pot of all the different nationalities and religions, and you go on the light train, and you're all together, sharing seats together, and everybody just wants to, just to get on with their lives and bring up their families and work and make a good living and make a good life for their families.
Absolutely. Now, Les, I just wanted to know, going off the subject of Israel for a moment, I know that you're very involved as the international, how do you pronounce it, philatelic.
Philatelic.
You're the International Philatelic Commissioner for the last 12 years. And just explain to people what this is, please.
Okay, so my father was a very avid stamp collector, and he was very knowledgeable, and he instilled this love for stamps into his children, both my brothers and my sister and myself. But I really took it to, I was very involved in stamps. I love stamps, and I used to collect animals on stamps, and especially dogs and cats. And I just loved it. And any letter that came, I would just keep the stamps. And my main collection was dogs and cats on stamps. And I actually exhibited it was then Rhodesia, representing South Africa there when I was a youth. But I got very involved in writing up exhibits. I collected an exhibit on Jerusalem, and I started collecting the old letters from Jerusalem, which I found fascinating. And when I came to Israel in '94, I had a collection of Jerusalem, which I exhibited, and they asked me if I could be a commissioner. Commissioner means that you take collections, people write up their collections, and they are exhibited at international exhibitions that everybody can see and enjoy, and they have these exhibits all over the world. So the very first, when I was a commissioner, was in Joburg in 2010. And I'll never forget, I came to the exhibition. It was in Sandton, the Convention Center. It was a wonderful international exhibition. And there I saw the Pakistani and the Indian commissioners, and they weren't speaking to each other because there's a big conflict between sometimes Pakistan and India. And the Pakistani commissioner had asked me, he saw me with a yarmulke, and he said to me, what do I do for halal? And I thought, I don't. So I went out, I got a packet of Simba crisps, I gave it to him and said, this is the halal sign. Any product that's got I showed him the Betin sign and the halal sign that you can eat. And I could still see that they just weren't interacting, the Pakistani and the Indian. And then we just got together over a cup of coffee and we started speaking cricket. And I mentioned, all barriers broke down. I mentioned Tendulkar and Khan, and then they started speaking, and they became such close friends, and they stuck together for the rest of that exhibition.
Oh, well, that's amazing.
But so I'll just mention, there's a saying, and it's true, that stamps, they know no boundaries, they cross oceans and seas throughout the world. And in 2012, I was very fortunate. They asked me, because the reason why they asked me is that I could go in on my South African passport to be the commissioner in Indonesia, in Jakarta. And I went with my wife. It was quite an interesting experience because Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world. In those days, it was over 250 million Muslims, and there's no diplomatic relations with Israel. But I was afforded the opportunity to come in to represent Israel there, and I could go in on my South African passport, and we actually went, and it was absolutely phenomenal. When we were in Singapore just for Shabbat, what had happened is they asked all the commissioners to come on Shabbat to go through the customs, because it's a big deal. You bring these very valuable collections and it has to go through customs. And I spoke to the organizers, and I mentioned, due to I keep Shabbat, would it at all be possible to come on the Sunday? And they made special arrangements that I could come, and we spent Shabbat in Singapore. And I remembered in the shul, we were speaking to the Israeli ambassador then. I told him that we were heading out for Jakarta, and he said, "Oh, don't wear your yarmulke there, it's too dangerous." So I didn't know what to expect. And when we got to the airport and we were right in the arrivals, there was a sign, which I will never forget. It said, "Death penalty to drug traffickers." So, you're going into the unknown. But as we got to the customs officials, and after that went very smoothly, the taxi driver that took us to this wonderful hotel in Jakarta, I decided I'm not going to wear my cap. I'll just wear my yarmulke like I always do. And it was absolutely incredible. Nobody, I had no ill feelings. Everybody knew I was coming from Israel. We were accepted so incredibly warmly. It was something unbelievable. I just couldn't believe the hospitality.
How wonderful. You know what, I'm being told to wrap up, and there's so much more that I want to ask you, Les. You're going to have to come back. Thank you, Craig.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
We're going to have to wrap up in a moment. Liz, you know what? You actually brought such unity into today. And Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change that you wish to see in the world. I believe that you very much spoke about that today, the change that you have brought in. And I thank you so much. We are going to be ending very shortly with a lovely song, which will not come through on the podcast. It was by Aloe Black and Simon Sinek, which is called Together is Better Than One. And for any of you out there, I would suggest that you looked up the YouTube. It's so lovely. Les, how would you like to end?
Okay, so Sue, first of all, I really want to thank you so much. I'm extremely grateful to you. It's been such an honor and privilege to be on your show. Can I end off with one saying from, and I think this really encapsulates everything, from Hillel Hazaken, Hillel the Elder. He was a preeminent sage of ours, and he said when a convert wanted to come and he said, "Tell me the whole Torah while I stand on one foot," he said, "That what is hateful to you, don't do unto another." That is the entire Torah. The rest is just interpretation. Go and study. And that's basically the bottom line. It's something that's, don't do unto others that you wouldn't want them to do unto you. That is the bottom line. So I want to thank you so much, Sue. This has been such an incredible time being together. I love your show. I listen to it nearly every week, and I'm extremely grateful to you.
Thank you, Les.
Very
it's
much.
Lovely seeing you, meeting you, and seeing you on screen at least. Perhaps one day we'll meet in real life time.
Please, God. Please, for sure. Not perhaps, definitely. We really must.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Craig.
High FM, your station of choice since 2008.
This is Aloe Black. He is the singer of a song called Together is Better.
And this is Simon Sinek. He is the author of a book called Together is Better. Yeah, I mean, it could be the first time an adult book has been published with a song related to it. And I've been thinking about this for a very long time. How can I have one of my songs released with a book, with a publisher or a writer, or to even score the pages of a novel? I think is a really interesting concept. And when Simon asked if I could, attend his book launch, and he told me the title of the book, I said, well, coincidentally, I have a song with the same title. And turns out they're pretty much about the same things. Together is better.
Together is better. I would not be where I am today if it weren't for the love and devotion and care and hard work of many people around me. It's certainly not me. You know, there's lots of people with good ideas, and I'm unbelievably lucky that I met people along the way who wanted to help me spread my message to others. And I'm fully aware of that. And no matter what I write and all the work that I do and all the talks that I give, there's this one thread that goes through all my work, that we are social animals and we are better together. I wanted to capture this one singular, beautiful, just elegant idea, and that's where the book came from.
I've always found that, great things can be accomplished alone, but amazing things can be accomplished in collaboration. It's hard to make a great song by yourself. It's always better, I think, to have many minds involved. And the song Together is Better really is about that helping hand. Whether it's a helping hand because you're in need, or a helping hand in order to enhance the experience that you're already engaging. I think it's a perfect sentiment.
You have a humility where you recognize that there's people around you who give you a venue and give you a space to shine. So it's not just that there's a song in this book. I'm glad that it's your song.